Jesus famously said in John 5:43, I am coming in my Father's name, and you receive me not. If another shall come in his own name, him you will receive. Who could Jesus be talking about and referring to? I'll give you my answer coming up now. We all remember Jesus saying in Matthew 24:2 that when he was shown the temple, he said that not there won't be one stone left upon another until all are thrown down. And his prediction, as we all know, came through in the year 70 CE when the temple was destroyed. But that's about the limited knowledge we Christians have of it. Let's take the story a little further and see where it goes. In the year 63, there was a bitter war between the Romans and the Jews because the Jews were trying to get their freedom from being oppressed by the Romans. And this war lasted from 63 to 73, with the temple being destroyed in 70. Now, with that happening, the Jews were put down. It was a bloody war, but the Jews still managed to keep some sort of relationship with the Romans. So they weren't completely blown out. So here's what happens. Now we fast forward 40 years from the destruction of the temple. And the Romans are being ruled by a guy named Trajan. And he's in talks with the Jews. Now this is 110 CE, 40 years after. So he's in talks with the Jews. The Jews want to build the temple again. And he's going to allow it, but not on the Temple Mount, somewhere else. So the Jews were angry about that, and again the Jews rose up, and again they were crushed down. And this time the Romans thought they crushed them completely. So now, right after this war, Trajan was assassinated, and Hadrian took his place. Now we fast forward a little bit to 135 CE, where a guy by the name of Simon Bar Kochba comes into play. He was an unusual person, very charismatic. People were drawn to him. He had, they said, superhuman strength. He could rip out trees by the root, they said. And people seemed to follow him. He was a little along the lines of a Samson. People were drawn to him. And a rabbi named Akiva, he drew on Numbers 24. I have it on my board here. He drew on Numbers 24 to say that from Jacob will come a star, a shooting star. Now, he changed his name to Kochba, which means star. The Jews love to change names to similar things and come up with a different meaning. Now, they called him Simon Bar Kochba. Now, he amassed an army of 350,000 soldiers, and with the goal of freeing themselves from the Romans. And what they did is they came around, they took Galilee, they surrounded Jerusalem, and they pressured their way into Jerusalem. So now they took over Jerusalem, and they were actually occupied it for 3 years. They were talking about building a temple and all this stuff, and the rabbis, actually Rabbi Akiva, declared him to be the Messiah. They said he is the Messiah. So now we're in dangerous territory. Now, as things go on, and what's happening in the Temple Mount, he's starting to feel uneasy, a little paranoid. He's starting to think that the rabbis are turning on him. They're conspiring against him. He ends up executing a rabbi, and then all the rabbis turned on him. And his name is no longer Simon Bar Kochba. His name is Kochba, Simon Bar Kochba. Kochba means fake, false, meaning he's a false Messiah. So they changed on this. But what happens is the Romans now came in, and there's a huge battle. And according to Diocletian, 500,000 Jews were killed. But it was a bloody battle because a lot of the Jews were all in on this, this final battle. And by the time this war ended, the Jews had lost everything. They were completely wiped out. And the Jews fought so hard that the Romans had to bring in their best soldiers and their best, commanders from their best generals from all the way from Europe, from Germany. They had to bring them all in to push this down. But finally, the Jews were absolutely massacred. And that puts an end to the Jews in Israel. This is where they're done. Now everything's done. There's a lot of consequences to this because the actual original Hebrew, the biblical Hebrew, this is where they say it kind of ends. It sort of ended earlier, and they were just using it in the temple for prayers and things like that. But now it's pretty much gone, and the Jews are pretty much out of the land. Until the famous Isaiah 66:8. If we remember, he predicted that Israel will become a nation in one day, and that was May 14th, 1948, when they carved out a spot and Israel became a country again. So Isaiah nailed that one. But we know a little bit now, about how the Jews ended up getting knocked out of the land completely. A lot of us Christians, we don't understand these stories. We don't understand. We are grafted into the Jews. We're grafted into the root of Jesse. So what happens with the Jews and what the Jews do, it affects us. We need to understand this stuff. We're not just branches that hang out in the air. We're attached to something. We're attached to the Jews. So we need to understand what their plights were so that we can understand where we came from. Because if you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you're going. So I think I'm going to drop it off at that point. Stick around and I'm going to give you just some absolute useless information next.
Simon says, dry up. Oh, I'll get all the water in the world and store it.
Okay, a little bonus useless information. Some of it's good. When they use the word bar means son. So it would be Simon, the son of Kochba. That was his name. We do something similar in our language today. We use John's son. So it's Steve, John's son, but they rammed John's son together. That's kind of where they got it. And, back earlier, people were more biblically minded than they are today, unfortunately. But, as a young kid, I used to watch Underdog, and they had, if you saw on my thumbnail, that this is Simon Bar Sinister, which is actually a great name. Simon, the son of Sinister. I love it. Just a little. Now, here's useless information for you. His voice, if you notice, if you're familiar with the character, his voice is actually, if you know the movie A Wonderful Life, Mr. Potter, it's the same voice. However, it wasn't. It was Lionel Barrymore. He was the actor that played it. In It's a Wonderful Life. But the man who voiced Simon Bar Sinister and also Riff Raff, also in the same thing, he was the one who voiced Simon Bar Sinister, but he imitated Lionel Barrymore. So just some interesting, useless facts to end our day.